The throne room of the Draith Dominion was built to make people feel small. Black stone walls rose higher than any building on Earth. Blue fire burned in tall braziers, throwing cold light across rows of alien nobles, tall, silver-eyed, silent as statues. And in the center of that vast floor stood one human woman, alone. Her name was Lira Ashworth. She was not a soldier. She was not important. She was a junior translator who had been sent to the edge of known space as part of a tribute delegation, offered to the most powerful empire humanity had ever encountered, in hopes it would not decide to erase them. And right now, every alien in that room was staring at her, waiting to see her break. On the throne above her sat the Alpha King, Kael Vorn Draith. 9 feet of muscle and quiet menace, a crown of black metal fused in a skin scarred by wars no human could imagine. His voice, when he finally spoke, was low and amused, like a predator that hadn't decided yet whether its prey was worth killing. "Tell me, little human," he said, "do all your kind stand this still when they are afraid? Or is it only the small ones who forget how to speak?" Laughter rippled through the court. Cruel, practiced laughter, the kind meant to remind her exactly what she was to them. Nothing. A curiosity. A pet on a leash, brought forward to be mocked before the real business of the Empire continued. Lyra's hands were shaking at her sides. She knew the rules. Bow your head. Apologize for existing. Survive. Every human before her had done exactly that. She lifted her chin instead. "I'm not afraid of you," she said, her voice steady even as her heart slammed against her ribs. "I'm just trying to figure out if you're actually as clever as your throne suggests, or if you just enjoy watching people who can't fight back." The laughter died instantly. Silence dropped over the court like a blade. Guards along the walls straightened, hands drifting to weapons, waiting for a single word from the king to end her life right there on the black stone floor. No one, not noble, not slave, not enemy commander, had ever spoken to Kael Vorn Draith like that and lived to hear his answer. For 3 full seconds, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the corner of his mouth curved upward. He smiled. Not the cold, mocking smile he wore for court theater. A real one. Sharp, surprised, and impossibly pleased. No one in that room had ever seen the Alpha King smile like that, which meant no one, including Lira, had any idea what was about to happen next. The throne room of the Draith Dominion was built to make people feel small. Black stone walls rose higher than any building on Earth. Blue fire burned in tall braziers, throwing cold light across rows of alien nobles, tall, silver-eyed, silent as statues. And in the center of that vast floor stood one human woman, alone. Her name was Lira Ashworth. She was not a soldier. She was not important. She was a junior translator who had been sent to the edge of known space as part of a tribute delegation, offered to the most powerful empire humanity had ever encountered, in hopes it would not decide to erase them. And right now, every alien in that room was staring at her, waiting to see her break. On the throne above her sat the Alpha King, Kael Vorn Draith. 9 feet of muscle and quiet menace, a crown of black metal fused in a skin scarred by wars no human could imagine. His voice, when he finally spoke, was low and amused, like a predator that hadn't decided yet whether its prey was worth killing. "Tell me, little human," he said, "do all your kind stand this still when they are afraid? Or is it only the small ones who forget how to speak?" Laughter rippled through the court. Cruel, practiced laughter, the kind meant to remind her exactly what she was to them. Nothing. A curiosity. A pet on a leash, brought forward to be mocked before the real business of the Empire continued. Lyra's hands were shaking at her sides. She knew the rules. Bow your head. Apologize for existing. Survive. Every human before her had done exactly that. She lifted her chin instead. "I'm not afraid of you," she said, her voice steady even as her heart slammed against her ribs. "I'm just trying to figure out if you're actually as clever as your throne suggests, or if you just enjoy watching people who can't fight back." The laughter died instantly. Silence dropped over the court like a blade. Guards along the walls straightened, hands drifting to weapons, waiting for a single word from the king to end her life right there on the black stone floor. No one, not noble, not slave, not enemy commander, had ever spoken to Cale Vorn Drafe like that and lived to hear his answer. For 3 full seconds, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the corner of his mouth curved upward. He smiled. Not the cold, mocking smile he wore for court theater. A real one. Sharp, surprised, and impossibly pleased. No one in that room had ever seen the Alpha King smile like that, which meant no one, including Lira, had any idea what was about to happen next. 6 days earlier, Lira hadn't even wanted to be on this ship. She'd been added to the delegation at the last minute, the only human fluent enough in Dominion trade tongue to keep the peace talks from collapsing into misunderstanding. She was supposed to be invisible. Translate. Stay quiet. Let the senior diplomats handle the king. But she watched those senior diplomats fold day after day, forced to kneel longer than dignity allowed, forced to apologize for insults that were never given, forced to smile while the court laughed at humanity's smallness, its fragile bodies, its short, blinking lives. And she noticed something the others missed, because they were too frightened to look closely. The king wasn't cruel for entertainment. He was testing them. Every insult was a question disguised as an attack, and every human so far had answered it the same way, by bowing lower, by begging, by proving again and again that humanity would crawl if the crawling kept them alive. He wasn't impressed by that. He was disgusted by it. Lira saw in the way his eyes would flick away, bored, every time another delegate groveled, like he was searching the room for something and hadn't found it yet. She started wondering, quietly, dangerously, what if no one had actually failed the test yet because no one had actually tried to pass it? She didn't get the chance to test that theory. Not until the final session, when a lead delegate made a fatal misstep, corrected by a rival Dominion noble who'd been waiting all week to sabotage the treaty for his own political gain, and was removed from the talks entirely, disgraced, forbidden to speak again in court, which left exactly one human still permitted to stand before the king. Her. She hadn't planned to defy him. She'd planned to survive the way everyone else had, quietly, carefully, invisibly, but standing there, watching him toy with her the way he'd toyed with everyone before her. Something in her simply refused to bow one more time. So she didn't. Now, in the ringing silence after his smile, the king rose from his throne. He descended the steps slowly, and the entire court seemed to hold its breath with each footfall. He stopped less than an arm's length from her, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes, close enough that she could feel the low, warm heat radiating off him like banked fire. "Do you know," he said, quiet enough now that it felt almost private, though every noble in the hall strained to hear, "how many delegates your species has sent me?" 12. 12 in 6 days. Every one of them knelt before I finished my first sentence. I noticed, Lira said, and do you know what that told me? That we're good at being afraid. That you were lying to me, the king said. Every bow, every apology, theater, told me nothing true about what your people actually are. His silver eyes moved over her face, searching, the way he'd searched the room all week, looking for something he hadn't found. You are the first person in this court, human or otherwise, who has told me the truth in 6 days, even when it terrified you. Lira swallowed hard. So what happens now? The king's smile deepened, and for one unbearable second, it wasn't the smile of a ruler evaluating a diplomat. It was something far more dangerous, far more personal. Now, he said, I decide whether I let you leave my court at all. A ripple of shock ran through the nobles. This was not how tribute delegations ended. This was not in any treaty, any protocol, any script humanity had prepared for. And the rival noble who'd engineered the earlier disgrace stepped forward immediately, furious, demanding the king reconsider, insisting a human could not be trusted, could not be honored, could not be kept. The king didn't even look at him. She spoke the truth to a king who could kill her for it. He said, voice carrying now, meant for the whole court to hear. Show me one noble in this room who has done the same. No one answered. No one could. Lira stood frozen between the two most powerful forces in the room, a furious rival who wanted her gone, and a king who very clearly did not. With the entire fate of Earth's treaty, and something far more personal, hanging in the silence. The king leaned down, just slightly, so only she could hear. "Walk out of this hall today," he murmured, "and you save your species a treaty. Walk out beside me, and you'll find out exactly what happens to the only human who ever made an alpha king smile." The court held its breath, waiting. Lira didn't know which answer would save her people. She only knew, standing there, that for the first time since she'd landed on this alien world, she wasn't afraid of the answer at all. The silence stretched so long that Lira could hear her own pulse in her ears. Every noble in the hall was watching her now, not the king, waiting to see if the strange little human who'd survived one impossible moment was about to ruin everything with a second. She thought of Earth, of the treaty, of every person back home who had no idea their entire future was balanced on the shoulders of a translator nobody had wanted to send in the first place. "I don't walk out beside anyone," she said finally, loud enough for the whole court to hear. "Not you, not the treaty. I walk out as myself, and whatever happens next happens because it's true, not because I traded my people for it." For a heartbeat, she thought she'd made a fatal mistake. Then the king laughed, a real laugh, low and startled, like something had cracked open in him that hadn't moved in years. "There it is again," he said, almost to himself. "The truth. You really can't help it, can you?" "Not really, no." "Good," he said. "Lies bore me. I've had 6 days of nothing but lies." He straightened, turning back toward the throne, and raised his voice so the entire hall could hear the verdict. "The treaty stands. Earth's terms are accepted, in full, without the concessions my council demanded this morning." A murmur of disbelief rolled through the nobles. The rival who'd sabotaged the earlier delegate, a sharp-featured noble named Threxian Vale, stepped forward, furious. "Your Majesty, you cannot simply—" "I can," the king said, without even glancing at him, "because I'm the Alpha King, and you are not." The hall went silent again, but this silence was different. Not shock at Lira. Fear of him. He looked back at her, and for just a moment, the mask of the ruler slipped, and something far more human, far more dangerous, showed underneath. "You're free to return to your people," he said quietly. "But I find I would very much like to know more about the woman who wasn't afraid to insult me in front of my entire court." Lira felt her face go warm despite herself. "Is that an order, Your Majesty?" "No," the king said, and this time his smile was softer, almost boyish, utterly unlike the predator who'd mocked her 6 days ago. "It's a request. You may be the first person to ever hear me make one." She should have said no. Every instinct honed by 6 days of watching diplomats grovel told her that closeness to the king was closeness to danger, that whatever this was, it wasn't safe, and it definitely wasn't in any briefing document Earth had prepared her for. But when the court was dismissed and the great hall emptied out, she found herself walking beside him anyway, down a corridor lit by the same cold blue fire, toward a private terrace that overlooked the Dominion capital, a city of black spires and floating lights stretching to the horizon. "You're wondering why I didn't kill you," he said, without turning. "A little," Lira admitted. "Mostly I'm wondering why you're showing me this." She gestured at the view, a city no human had ever seen up close, glittering under 3 moons. "Because for 6 days, every human I met showed me exactly what they thought I wanted to see," he said. "I wanted, for once, to show someone what's actually here. Not the throne, not the crown. Just," he paused, searching for the word, "this." She looked at him, really looked past the crown and the scars and the weight of an empire on his shoulders, and saw for just a moment someone tired of being feared. "It's beautiful," she said, meaning the city, and maybe not only the city. "So I'm told," he said, and when she glanced over, he wasn't looking at the skyline at all. Her breath caught. Whatever this was, it was moving faster than any diplomatic protocol had ever accounted for, and some small, panic part of her mind screamed that she needed to step back, needed to remember she was here to save a treaty, not fall into something she couldn't control. "Your Majesty." "Kale," he said, "when it's just us, I've had 1,000 people call me Your Majesty. I'd like, for once, to hear my name from someone who isn't afraid to use it. Kale, she repeated softly, and something in his expression shifted, like the word landing was more powerful than any treaty clause. But peace, she was learning, never lasted long in this court. The terrace doors burst open behind them, and Phyrexian Vale strode in, flanked by 2 of his own guards, fury barely restrained beneath his composed exterior. "Forgive the intrusion, Your Majesty," he said, though his tone made clear he wasn't sorry at all. "But the council will not accept a treaty granted on a whim, nor a human elevated above her station because she flattered your ego in open court." "Careful, Vale," Kale said, voice suddenly cold, all trace of warmth gone. "You're speaking about the terms of a treaty I have already sealed." "I'm speaking about her," Vale snapped, turning his glare on Lira. "A creature who has been in this palace for 6 days, and already you let her walk your private terrace, hear your name, threaten the balance my family has protected for 3 generations. He stepped closer, and Lira forced herself not to flinch. "You have no idea what you've stumbled into, human." The king does not simply smile. Not without cost. Not without consequence. For him, and for whoever stands beside him when the council decides they've had enough. "Is that a threat?" Kale asked, low and dangerous. "It's a warning," Vale said. "One I suggest you both take seriously, before the council takes matters into their own hands." He turned and left as sharply as he'd arrived, guards trailing behind him, leaving the terrace ringing with the echo of his warning. Lyra's heart was pounding, not from fear of Vale exactly, but from the sudden, cold understanding that whatever was happening between her and the king wasn't just personal anymore. It was political, dangerous, watched. "What did he mean?" she asked. "About the council?" Kale was quiet for a long moment, jaw tight, looking out over the city like he was calculating something he didn't want to say out loud. "The Dominion has rules about who may stand close to the throne," he said finally. "Rules that have never once had to account for a human. Vale isn't wrong that there will be a cost." He turned to face her fully, and the warmth was still there beneath the tension, stubborn, unwilling to disappear just because danger had walked in. "The question is whether you're willing to risk finding out what that cost is." Lira looked at him, at the king who'd smiled when no one else had ever seen him do it, who'd thrown away a treaty's worth of leverage rather than let a lie stand, and felt the truth settle into her chest before she'd even fully decided it. "I didn't come this far to walk away now," she said. Something shifted in Kale's expression, relief, and something warmer beneath it. "Then you should know," he said quietly. "Vale doesn't make idle threats. By morning, the council will move against this treaty, against you or against me. Possibly all 3. Behind them, in the doorway, a palace guard appeared, breathless, urgent. "Your Majesty," he said, "the council has called an emergency session. They're demanding the human be brought before them, tonight." Lira felt the warmth of the moment vanish, replaced by something colder, sharper. Whatever came next, the treaty, and her life, would be decided in a room far more dangerous than the throne hall she'd already survived once. The council chamber was nothing like the throne hall. There was no crowd here, no spectacle, no blue fire meant to dazzle outsiders into submission. Just a circle of 9 ancient Dominion nobles seated in a ring of dark stone, lit by a single cold light from above. It felt less like a court and more like a tribunal. Lira stood in the center of that circle, alone, because Kale had been forbidden to enter. "The council rules on matters of succession and bloodline without the king present," he'd told her, jaw tight with barely restrained fury as guards blocked him at the door. "It's the one law even I cannot break." "I'm sorry." She told him she'd be fine. She wasn't sure she believed it. Vale sat at the center of the 9, calm now, composed, every inch the picture of reasonable authority rather than the furious noble who'd stormed the terrace hours earlier. That, Lira realized, was somehow more frightening. "Human," he said, not unkindly, which made it worse. "You stand accused of nothing. I want to be clear about that. This council has no interest in punishing you for words spoken in the throne hall. Words that, frankly, took more courage than this court has seen in a generation. But Lira said, but Vale agreed, you are now a factor in something far older than you understand. The king has never, not once in 40 years of rule, shown personal favor to anyone outside Dominion bloodlines. Not an ally, not a hostage, not a tribute. He leaned forward. You may not have intended to become a political weapon, Lira Ashworth, but that is precisely what you are now. And weapons are dangerous no matter who is holding them. One of the other nobles, older, silver-scaled, spoke next, voice like grinding stone. If the king's affection for a human becomes known across the Dominion, other worlds will see it as weakness. Enemies who have waited decades for an opening will find one. This is not about you, human. It is about 100 worlds that depend on this throne staying strong. Lira felt the weight of that settle over her, heavier than any insult in the throne hall, because this wasn't cruelty. This was truth, spoken plainly, by people who genuinely believed the stability of their empire outweighed anything happening between her and their king. So what do you want from me? She asked quietly. Vale's expression didn't change. Leave. Tonight, before the sun rises. Return to your ship, your treaty already secured, your people already safe. Never see the king again. In exchange, the council will forget this ever happened, and Earth's alliance with the Dominion will remain untouched, protected for generations. The room went silent, waiting. It was, Lira realized, the exact same silence from 6 days ago, the one that had followed her defiance in the throne hall. Except this time, no one was waiting to see if she'd survive. They were waiting to see if she'd sacrifice herself quietly, the way every human before her had. She thought of the treaty, of Earth still fragile, still one bad decision away from catastrophe, depending entirely on this alliance holding. She thought of every person back home who had no idea how close everything had come to falling apart twice in 1 week, and how easily, with one simple word, she could make sure it never did again. Leave. Say yes. Save everyone. It's the smart choice. It's the right choice. But she thought, too, of the terrace, of Kale's voice softening around her name, of a king who had thrown away every ounce of political leverage he had rather than let a room full of powerful people believe a lie, because for 6 days she'd been the only person willing to tell him the truth. If she left now, quietly, to protect the treaty, wasn't that just another kind of lie? A vow dressed up as sacrifice? No, she said. The word landed in the chamber like a dropped blade. I didn't come to this court to be easy, Lira continued, voice steady even as her heart hammered. I came because my planet needed someone who wouldn't lie to save themselves. If I walk away tonight to protect a treaty, I'm proving every fear you have about humans being weak, being disposable, being willing to erase ourselves the moment it's convenient for someone stronger. She looked around the circle, meeting every pair of ancient eyes. You want to know if I'm dangerous? I'm not dangerous because the king smiled at me. I'm dangerous because I refuse to disappear just because it would make things simpler. The silver-scaled elder studied her for a long moment. And if your presence here truly does destabilize this throne, if enemies use it as an excuse for war, then that's a problem worth solving honestly, Lira said, not one worth hiding from by pretending it never existed. You're the Dominion. You've survived worse than an inconvenient truth. For the first time since she'd entered the chamber, Vale's composure cracked. Not into anger this time, but something closer to grudging respect. She argues like a Dominion noble, he muttered, almost to himself. She argues like someone who actually believes what she's saying, the elder replied, which, in my experience, is far more dangerous. The doors to the chamber burst open before the council could vote. Kale strode in, law or no law, guards trailing uselessly behind him, unwilling to physically stop their own king. The council rose in surprise, but he didn't wait for permission to speak. I've listened at that door long enough, he said. You want to debate whether her presence weakens this throne. Let me answer that myself, since apparently my opinion matters even when the law says it shouldn't. He crossed the chamber and stood beside Lira, close enough that the entire council could see exactly what he meant to say next. For 40 years, I have ruled through fear, because fear was the only currency this court respected. This woman is the first person to make me remember there's a difference between being respected and being feared. If that makes me weak in your eyes, then perhaps it's this council's definition of strength that needs to change, not her. Silence again. But this time, no one in the chamber seemed to know how to answer him. The elder finally spoke, slow and deliberate. The law forbids you from ruling on matters of council business, Your Majesty. But it does not forbid the council from asking your intentions plainly, since apparently they concern all of us now. Her ancient eyes moved to Lira, then back to Kale. So, plainly, what are your intentions toward this human? Kale didn't hesitate. To stand beside her, in front of this entire empire if I must, and let every world watching decide for themselves whether a king who values truth over fear is weaker, or simply the first Dominion ruler brave enough to admit what strength actually looks like. Lira felt her throat tighten, not from fear this time. The elders studied them both for a long moment, then finally inclined her head. Not quite approval, but something adjacent to it. Then let the record show, she said, the council did not grant this. The king simply refused to ask permission. A faint, dry amusement crossed her ancient features. Perhaps that is fitting. Some things were never meant to be decided by committee. Vale said nothing. For once, he had no argument left to make. Later, on the same terrace overlooking the same glittering city, Lira stood beside Kale as the first light of the Dominion's twin suns broke over the spires. The council didn't say yes, she said. No, Kale agreed. But they didn't say no, either. In this court, that's practically a celebration. She laughed. A real laugh. The tension of the last 6 days finally beginning to loosen in her chest. So what happens now? She asked. Kale turned to her, the same smile from the throne hall breaking across his face. The one that had silenced an entire court. The one no one had ever seen before her. Now, he said, the whole Dominion finds out what happens when a king stops ruling through fear and starts ruling beside someone who is never afraid of him to begin with. Behind them, the city stirred awake beneath the rising suns. And for the first time since she'd landed on this alien world, Lira felt certain she wasn't just surviving the Dominion anymore. She was about to change it.